Well, Ferraz, welcome to the Christians in Sport podcast. Now, obviously, I should say Nick Ferraby because that's your proper name, but you're Ferraz to everyone, aren't you? So welcome. I'm going to kick you off with the first question that we ask all our guests, and which I should tell you, we have warned him that is coming his way. Here's the first question, though, always. What does it mean for you to have your sport and faith connected, to play connected?
It's been a journey of seeing my sport and my faith come together over the years. And it's been one that's not always smooth, just thinking over the years of journeying with those two things together. But I think, some of the key things that I've tried to kind of bring together and is firstly kind of worship, really. Understanding how my sport can be worship and part of my relationship with God. Growing up until the age of 20, it wasn't really. Those two weren't together. Kind of what I thought was faith and Christianity was very much separate on a Sunday to what I was doing on a midweek. And so kind of understanding that actually sport in and of itself can be a great way to worship God and to play for his glory instead of my own. And to, I guess, if God is creator, which, I came to understand as a Christian in my early 20s, he's given us sport as a great kind of way in which we can express that creative image that he's given us. It says, in Genesis 1 that we're made in God's image. In other words, we're kind of made in his likeness to resemble that creativeness in the way we play our sport. So, just in simple terms, every time we work on a new cricket shot, for example, in training, the buzz from them playing that in a game and nailing it and getting a boundary is, I think, a God-given joy that he gives us. So I think just in simple terms, learning that and kind of in terms of the game, just the way the game has creatively moved on and developed, you see the purest parts of God's creation coming out in cricket in the way it's developed and evolved and new shots being played. Kevin Peterson brought new shots into the game, didn't he, when he started switch hitting, seam bowlers, and then just formats have changed. Kerry Packer brought in the ODI series, one day format, and then T20s kind of come out in the 2000s. And then you got tactics have evolved. I think it's an amazing thing when you see tactics have changed over the years. You see Owen Morgan's numbers being put up in the dressing room now. They're all God-given creative things that are part of sport. So I think just seeing that and actually recognizing that actually that is a God-given thing has helped me in my sport.
How did that breakthrough happen? So I'm assuming you had a faith then as a youngster, and that you had to work out what it looked like to have a faith in God through Christ. And as you've just described, the creativity, the fact that you were made by God, that it was very much a part of being a Christian. Take me back a little bit, both to your own faith and how you got to that tipping point that you've just described to us.
Well, yeah, growing up, really, sport was everything for me. I arrived at university, Loughborough University, as a very fresher, straight out of school. And sport had been everything for me kind of through my schooling time. And I arrived kind of with hockey and cricket as my kind of two main sports. I'd done some England juniors for hockey and some Leicester second team stuff for cricket. So I wanted to get stuck into both those sports at university. And actually, I loved it. First time I was at university, totally kind of away from home. And it was probably 90% sport and training and being with teammates and 10% studies. That's the way kind of university rolled out in my first year. And I loved it. But I think, at the same time, my faith was something I had in my life, but a very small part. I thought I was a Christian. I would have called myself a Christian, but it was very much a small part of my life. I didn't really know what Jesus had done for me on the cross and the implications for that in my life at that stage in my first year. And so as a consequence, I was living very much kind of in two worlds, one foot in the church and one foot in the world. I used to go sporadically to church kind of through my first year at university, but a lot of the Loughborough hockey games, national prem games, were on Sundays, and so we'd either be away for the whole day traveling across the country, Or if we're at home, we'd be playing in the afternoon and then straight down to the pub afterwards. And if you're a fresher, you got no option. You can't, tell your teammates you're going to church. And I certainly wasn't in that place. So my first year was very much kind of living a life that wasn't a Christian life, really, one that honored God. But actually, then things changed in my second year. And there was one moment at the end of my summer holidays between my first and second year when I'd been at home for the summer, living at home, playing cricket over the summer. And my brother, who was a Christian, recognized that my life wasn't quite right. And it was sliding away from what he knew we'd grown up with as a family. And he was dropping me off at a teammate's house, cricket teammate's house, at the end of that summer for me to start off back at uni and for him to go off to his job and work. And he broke down in tears. And this, obviously, brother, this never happens. He broke down in tears, at which point I then start breaking down in tears. And he says to me, "Look, Nick, I can see," and this actually is in front of my teammates. So my teammates at the door, waiting for me to kind of arrive into the house, and we're just getting my stuff out the back of the car. I can remember the picture now. And my brother says to me, "Look, Nick, I don't care what's happening in your life. I just want you to start reading your Bible again." And even now, like the kind of lump in my throat comes back, because that was a massive wake up call, and it stirred me, just his heart and emotion. And yeah, so throughout that second year, I then kind of wanted to grapple with this. I did start grappling with it. I tried to read my Bible. I got far as kind of Exodus. I think I wasn't much of a reader. And so I kind of crashed and burned then. But my lifestyle was very much grappling through my second year. No one other than my brother kind of challenged me on this. And so it was very much an inner conviction. I think I can see God kind of was working in my life to show me the sinfulness of my life, that my life wasn't right with him. My relationship with a girlfriend wasn't right. Drinking and the falseness of the relationships I had, with drunken nights where I'd be full of life, and then the next morning I'd see the same person and not chat to them because I was a different person. So I started to kind of see through all this and started then to go back to church a bit more. And I was a classic kind of fringe church member throughout my second year. I used to go 5 minutes late and leave 5 minutes early so that I never had to speak to anyone. But on one occasion towards the end of the summer in that second year, a lady at the church got a hold of me, and she pulled me to one side and she said, "Look, I see you come to church, a bit more regularly recently. Why is it you always wear a shirt and tie?" And I had to explain. She thought I was just very formal Christian. It was actually just because our uniform for our hockey team was shirt and tie, and so I'd go from our hockey game and then go to church. But that was, a turning point in that conversation. And she said, "Look, why don't you join a university Bible study group at our church?" And from there, it all changed. I was open. I knew I needed God. I knew I needed to find out more. I wanted to read the Bible. I wanted to kind of find true life, because although sport was going well, it really wasn't fulfilling me in the ways that I thought it might. Even if it was going successfully, it wasn't fulfilling. And I could see the kind of falseness in my life, so to speak. So that was the journey between my second and third year. And over that summer, my heart and life just changed, really. My perspective on things, God changed my heart to want to desire his things. And I came back September, third year, joined a Christian sport group at the university. And that was where my journey of kind of sport and faith came together. And that just made a massive difference, understanding and meeting other sports people who had a genuine faith, but also were serious about their sport. Amazingly, in my first 2 years, and even at school, I never met one Christian in my teams and at university. And so this was a revelation for me to kind of join this Christian sport group. And it's why I'm passionate now about trying to be a Christian to any teammate, any official now who might be thinking about faith. So yeah, that's a kind of overview of kind of faith journey, really.
Yeah, very helpful. Well, the very reason we make this podcast is that many of our listeners will have a Christian faith, and there'll be a good number of people who are listening in on people, Ferrers like you. They get the sport, they know it inside out, they know the pressures of elite and competitive sport, and they may have some curiosity about where God fits into all this.
Mm.
You said something, a lot of interesting things there. One of the things caught my attention was that in this process as an undergraduate, at this point, right, you're playing for Leicestershire in the second team regularly. So you're playing at a very good level. You're playing high level hockey. On many levels, you should be really fulfilled because you're an extremely high achiever at one of the best sports universities in Europe. But you said that your faith brought a fulfillment. I think you said that a fulfillment that you hadn't experienced in your sport and in the social life that came from that. Do you want to unpack this fulfillment aspect?
Yeah, I guess I think the experiences in that second year there were a few occasions when I was kind of, the realities of high level sport the rubber hit the road. So midway through that second year, I got dropped from the first team hockey team. I would say, looking back at the time, it was because my lifestyle wasn't right. I was drinking too much, and my diet wasn't good enough. I probably wasn't doing the fitness I should have been doing. So I got dropped for a month or so. So that was an eye opener. But also, my cricket was kind of coming to a point where it was rubber hit the road as well. So I was 19, 20. I had to make decisions between hockey and cricket. And I needed to work out where I was going. And my cricket was kind of going okay, but there were, at Loughborough University, I think in the university first team, I think all but two of us were already professionally contracted. And we had Monty Panesar, who was an England prospect at that point, playing with us, who had been with the England Lions squad at the time. So a serious kind of cricket outfit. And so, it was sobering that actually, I wasn't what I thought I could be, and I wasn't on top of the world at times. And that made me realize actually my security and self-worth and value was very much undermined. And that's why I think, when we talk about identity, I break it down to kind of worth and value. What do we look to bring us worth and value? And my sport wasn't delivering that. My relationship with my girlfriend wasn't delivering that. My lifestyle wasn't delivering that. And that's the hole that I was desperately trying to fill. And that's what made me come back to the Bible, really, and come back to church, I would say.
And at that point, Nick, I think every single athlete or ex-athlete listening to us now will completely get that. When you come to the point in your career where you've climbed and climbed, you're getting above everybody else, you're up and up the ladder, then you're with the level that actually stretches you all the way, and actually you may not keep up with it. There's a version of that for all top young athletes. However high you go, you're very high up the ladder, but wherever you get to, you will get to there. Sometimes people will say, all right, that's fine. You found a degree of fulfillment and security. You found an equilibrium in your identity through Christian faith, through a relationship with God through Christ. Sometimes coaches, of course, who aren't Christians particularly worry that that'll take the edge away, the mojo. Now, you started off with my first question about connecting sport and faith. Return to that for us then. How did this knit together now then? Security and fulfillment in Christ, and yet energy to play, desire to play. How did that start to fit at this point again?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it's a really good point, and it'll look different in both sports, hockey and cricket. But I'd say I'd probably focus on cricket at this stage because cricket was the main sport by my third year. And I think the cricket was the one that was impacted mostly by my faith and my new relationship with God. I think, obviously as a batsman primarily, I bowled a little bit, but my batting was the one that kind of progressed more. I would say the anxiety and the pressure around trying to perform and score runs was one that was quite crippling at times. And I think what really made a difference was now, as a Christian, I could trust that God was in charge of my life. He was the number one in my life. I had been living life as if I was number one, and that what I want is going to be the best for me. But actually, when I recognized that God, the Lord Jesus, is now number one in my life, he knows what's best for my life. He's created me. He's given me the gifts and talents. I could now leave my cricket and whatever performance has come in his hands, and know that whatever comes will be the best for me. If I'm following him and wanting his best and his glory, then the best will come for me, whether that is to continue playing professional cricket or not, whether it's something else. And I remember that summer between my second and third year, that overwhelming peace just carried onto the pitch with me. And I was just able to go out just with a real free spirit and play in a way that I hadn't before, kind of liberated from the burden of thinking the whole world was on me, to now thinking, actually, well, it's not on me. I can enjoy the gift God has given me. I'm doing the hard yards in training. I can trust that as well, in a very kind of real sense, and know that actually, yeah, it's all in God's hands. And that just enabled me to play the way I did. And I scored more runs than I'd ever scored. And that eventually got me, I think I averaged kind of near the top in the team, the second team in that summer, and got me a contract for the following year. So I'd say that was the biggest impact. And actually my coaches, talk about the coaches and what they see, they clocked this. And I was also, through Christians as a Sport group at university, they were very strong to make sure that I was, to encourage me to share my faith with my teammates, which at first was a real battle and transition, but I started to do that. And so my coaches cottoned on to the fact that I'd become a Christian and asked me about it. So I just remember one conversation with Phil Whitaker, who was the second team coach at the time. I was on the boundary fielding and he was walking around and he said, "So Ferrers, what's this? I hear you found God." And there it was. It's just an opportunity just to say, actually, yeah. As it was, I didn't score any runs in that game, so it wasn't a great testimony to what I'm saying here. But the overall picture was there.
You made your first team debut for Leicestershire actually around 2007, wasn't it? 2007, I think. So we're in that period now, aren't we? Broadly speaking.
Yeah.
When we come to this point of conversation, again, for people who are competitive and elite athletes who share your faith, there are interesting questions on this, and they're often interesting to somebody who's not sure they are a Christian at this point. Okay, so you say you take your private life into the dressing room. I think that's what we're saying here, because professional sport so often, competitive and professional sport so often encourage you to present yourself differently in the changing room than you do at home. Keep home. When you're at the club, this is how it works at the club. Just be one of the club, one of the boys, one of the girls.
Yeah.
All right. So you don't hide. You're out that you have a Christian faith. This is news to people around you. Most people will say, good, thanks for telling us, show us. What were the challenges you faced now, the joys and the challenges that you faced when people knew that you had Christian faith, but it inevitably brought you into some kind of countercultural attitudes or behavior? Did that happen to you?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say, cricket is a unique sport. I mean, every sport's different in terms of what it looks like in terms of how much you spend time wise with your teammates. So cricket is one of those sports where for 4 days of a cricket match, you're in the dressing room or on the pitch with your teammates. You're in a hotel for 4 nights, unlike, rugby or football, where you might be training for, half a day or a full day, and then you're home with your family. Cricket is very much kind of, you're living with your teammates pretty much for the summer. And so that presents both great times with teammates and opportunities to share your faith and just to live alongside teammates, but also challenges in how the Christian negotiates that. And you can imagine a group of 11 lads in a dressing room for a whole day, especially when it's raining. You can imagine the amount of kind of drivel that gets talked and garbage that comes out of people's mouths, but just fun and banter. I have such cherished memories of those times, and that's part of why I loved the game, and why we love the game is because it is a unique game in that respect. But it has presented its challenges. I remember one occasion when in my Leicestershire time, when I was kind of making my way through from the second team to the first team, and we were in for training on one day, and the whole squad was in the first team dressing room kind of getting ready for training. And I walked into the changing room, and our Aussie overseas player, I won't say his name because the story's a little bit crude, or kind of crude for the day, but I walked in, and the Aussie overseas player said to me, "Hey Ferrers, what's this I hear about you not wanting to shag any birds until you get married?" At which point the whole dressing room kind of went silent, and I was put on the spot. I'd only just walked in, and I didn't know the player personally that well yet. So I was like, "Oh, good morning, good to see you too, mate." But I just said, "Look, yeah, that's true. I'm waiting for the one. Waiting till I meet the one," and kind of just made light of it. Of course, there's a lot of banter and chirps after that. There's that inevitable feeling of feeling this small, but at the same time knowing that I was in the right place, and a conviction that I was on the right path, so to speak, in my life. And what came from that, no conversation, that, as you said, in the dressing room, it's very hard to have heartfelt conversations when all the lads are in there. It's just banter. And you've got to, in some ways, kind of honor that, but at the same time, look for opportunities where the conversation can become more genuine. And there are other times when it did. That time it didn't. But later in the week, one of my fellow kind of second team players, Luke Wright, who was one of the juniors at the time, had done England on 19s, became a great player for Sussex and England. He then asked me about it. He said, "Look, what's this? When did you become a Christian? How did it happen? Why? What does this mean for your life? Why do Christians believe this?" He asked me a number of questions. And that was in the dressing room for the second team. And there were a few other lads in the conversations. We had a great discussion about it. And that was more genuine. Of course, one of the lads still had to chirp up and say, "But Ferris, think about all the damage you could do on the circuit," which is crude, I know. Those are the kind of the challenges, whether it be relationships, whether it be drinking on nights out between the second and the third day, the rain card for cricketers. What do you do with that when there's rain forecast the next day and the boys want to have a big night out in Leeds? Things like that. You have to work out how to navigate those issues, but I loved it on the whole. That said, I wasn't always perfect. There were times when I did slip up and messed up.
It's noticeable, actually, Ferris, as we record these conversations, there seems to be an incredible link between coming to faith, knowing that you have faith in Christ, to a kind of internal, almost existential experience of security and a joy that you didn't have before, and a gratitude that inevitably spills over into the way you conduct yourself in the changing room. Or in your case, in a hotel and so on. Often failing, of course, but there's an authenticity to it that leads to genuine conversations. And anyone who's competitive or elite player will know that these things are never forced. They're always intuitive, but they invariably follow from authentic behaviors, the courage to be your real self. As you've grown older, we're talking about the start of your cricketing career. We're talking about university here. We've got a few minutes to play with. I wouldn't mind fast forwarding a little bit, because as I interview you today, you're assistant pastor of Jersey Baptist Church, which is not a million miles away from being at Loughborough in the noughties, but it's a distance. Meanwhile, of course, you've carried on playing, and you, having been in Jersey for some time, you qualified to play in 2018. And it's been probably pretty exciting. 18 T20 internationals, And included in that is the qualifications for the T20 World Cup. So been quite fun, isn't it? Playing cricket in Jersey and being a Baptist minister. Give us the context.
Yeah, it was. The Jersey cricket journey has been a real bonus, really. The original move to Jersey was back in 2015 to take a role with Christian sport and combine that with a church. But then eventually became a full-time church worker for Jersey Baptist Church, which is where I am now. Been 4 or 5 years there, and it's a real joy kind of being involved with youth work there, children's work, young adults, doing some of the preaching, and yeah, a real joy. But still playing sport on the island, and still playing a bit of hockey and cricket locally, and of course the Jersey team, which wasn't really on the radar when I first moved there. I knew that they had a good kind of cricket setup, but I had to wait 3 years, I think 4 years, before I could qualify. It was originally 4 years, and then suddenly I got a phone call from the coach saying it's now 3 years. You're in. Do you want to come and do it? And I thought for about a second and said yes. I did have a wife and I think one child at that stage. I tried to do my maths here. So I did have a wife and one child. So I did have to kind of do due diligence and pass it by the boss. But it was just a real privilege and honor to be able to play at that level again and to play for Jersey. It's such an incredible set of players. Some in the cricket world will see their journey in associate cricket where they're really just going from strength to strength in the world qualifiers, T20 qualifiers, and they're now qualified for the next ODI tournament in a build up to the 50 over World Cup. So incredible setup, great coaching setup as well, which I loved kind of every minute of it, and some great experiences there as well. So yeah.
As a more mature man, how did it pan out with your faith and sport there? Obviously, it's an entirely different situation after many years as a Christian and in your day job now. Did the same pattern, without going into individual details, obviously, but has the pattern we've discussed in this podcast emerged there?
It's amazing how, even though life professionally can move on in many ways and family-wise, it's amazing how sport still has that ability to really grab you. The tournaments for Jersey, they come in tournaments as opposed to league, so you're away, consumed in cricket for, well, there's a build up of kind of 6 weeks training back in Jersey, and then there's maybe a couple of friendlies in the UK, and then you're away for three weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on the tournament. And it's amazing how you can still get engrossed in all those battles in terms of identity, self-worth, value, even though you're settled in life in many other ways, professionally and family-wise. It still has that ability to kind of challenge you. And it was, there were challenging times. I remember one particular moment where I was particularly challenged by kind of like identity. And that was during the World Cup qualifiers in 2018, I think it was, or 2019, when we were playing in the UAE, so Dubai and Abu Dhabi. We were one of 10 teams trying to qualify for the T20 World Cup. And we had a really good tournament. There were 5 games in our group. We beat Oman, who were above us in the rankings. We beat UAE, who are way above us in the rankings. And we beat Nigeria, which was an easier game. We lost to Ireland. They're a strong team. But then there was one game against Hong Kong, which on paper and on form, we should have won, really. But we didn't. And that game cost us the ability then to qualify for the T20 World Cup. And I'd say probably that is like, even just playing for many different teams, Cambridgeshire, university stuff, Leicestershire, Kibworth, my cricket club, many different journeys I've been on. That was probably the most soul destroying, because I guess the opportunity for such a small team, small country to qualify for the T20 World Cup. But I remember the end of that game, how hollow and gutted I was. I didn't perform very well in the game. And as a team, obviously we had, we didn't bat well enough. We're chasing a low score and we just banana skinned and didn't chase it. And so, and actually I reflect back on the way I was after that game. I wasn't probably a great witness because I was probably more gutted than anyone else on the team. Everyone was gutted. But I remember, a few teammates trying to talk to me about just general chit chat that evening after the game and the next day. I just couldn't do it. I was just stomach sick. And I guess it's probably because I thought, well, this is my last opportunity to have a real good stab at top level cricket, just for enjoyment, really. And just to push myself, challenge myself with the skills God given me. And it just didn't work out there. I'm a bit too old now to continue fighting that battle. And there's better younger players now that have come through in the jersey setup, which is a joy to see.
Whereas that's why a great writer, a friend anyway of mine, called Ashley Null, calls a sport the school of discipleship, because as long as you play, coach, compete, direct, you will have stories just like yours in your later 30s. You'll have them in your 40s and 50s and 60s, because God seems to use it goes back where you came in, I think. He didn't just make you, but he knows every detail of you, your psyche, your physicality, your technique, hand-eye. And he will use the thing that he gives you the greatest talent is in to draw you closer to himself in joy and adversity. That's how it seems to work, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think going back to the original question about how sport and faith came together, I would say through my sport, my relationship with God has very much grown. It's becoming a Christian and a follower of Jesus is very much about dependence. And actually our rebellion and sinfulness is mainly around our independence. We live independently of God and ordain our lives in ways in which are against God's order. But sport has that ability to help us realize we are very dependent on our creator. And sport has done that really over the years, from 2 years after university, playing professional cricket for Leicestershire, having a really good first year, then having a shocking second year, not getting offered another contract, having 2 years out kind of soul searching in my mid-20s. What am I going to do with this? Finding true identity. I remember the hollowness of kind of post that contract, the hollowness of people asking me, what do you do for a living now? And I couldn't say I'm a professional cricketer because I wasn't signed, I wasn't contracted. I just remember the identity crisis that was for me and how I needed to get my identity right with Jesus. But also just the joy of kind of working that out, getting a work grafting my game hard, and then getting re-signed again in 2007, 2008. And that's when I made my debut for Leicester, one-day debut, and had that year with Leicester. And it didn't work out long term. That was my final year. But I was at peace and content knowing that I'd got everything out of my talent and ability. And it wasn't quite good enough at age 25 to be better than the 19, 20-year-olds that were coming through, even though I was doing well and was at peace with that. And I think, and I think in terms of, witness and that authenticity, the authenticity is not just about kind of, I think, getting it right as a Christian, but also how we what we communicate when we get it wrong. And I think that's whether it's when I've had a few too many drinks, or whether I've kind of thrown the toys out when I've got out, which for a batsman is always the challenge. What do you do with your kit, your helmet, when you get back in the change room? How do you address an umpire's decision and language you used? I've always kind of taken the opportunities to try and communicate grace, that actually I'm a Christian because I get it wrong. Because I get it wrong, I recognize I need help. And that's why I'm a Christian, not because I think I get it right. I'm not a Christian because I get it right. I'm a Christian because I am sinful. I do need help. I do need Jesus to save me from myself so that I can live a life that glorifies him. There's been many times. I remember, if I've got time for one more story, there was one occasion when I was playing in a pro-am tournament in Barbados. The joys and pleasures of being a cricketer, you get to visit beautiful places. So we're in Barbados as a team, and we're playing in a pro-am tournament, and it was kind of more social than serious. And so at the end of the game, both teams are in the dressing room, and there were drinking fines going around. But this is Barbados, not UK, and so the drink was not beer, it was rum, which which is, of course, in Barbados is like water. It's, you know, very cheap. And so basically for anything in the game, whether it be good or a good part, whether a player's done something good or bad or stupid or funny, they had to do a finger for everything they did. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often. I had a very, very good game, which didn't pay well for the drinks fines. So I ended up, I got a few runs, I got some catches, and I ended up having to do, I think, 6 or 7 fingers on the pint of rum. And I remember that the fines were going around both teams. There's lots of cheering around the dressing room, on the table. Person would have to stand up, do their drink. And throughout that whole kind of like 20 minutes as it was coming around to me, I was like, Nick, say no. Say no. Tell them kind of what you believe and where you stand. Do it. Do it. In my head, I was saying, do it. It came round to me and I bottled it. I massively bottled it. I stood up and I tanked this ridiculous kind of half or more than a half pint of rum. And obviously I didn't drink much, so I was legless after that. But I also just felt sick to the stomach because I felt like, you know, that wasn't who I was. That wasn't my identity. And but the amazing thing is my teammates knew that evening. They kind of knew that I was gutted. And actually I saw one of those teammates just a few weeks ago catching up. And interestingly, he said to me, Ferraz, one of my biggest regrets from that tournament was, and I was speaking to another teammate, we were both saying our biggest regret is that we didn't step in for you and take that pint for you, because we knew you didn't want to do it and we knew you were gutted. So even in the mess, even when we get it wrong, if you know, you're doing by God's strength and by God's grace what we can, teammates notice. And authenticity is actually communicating in grace when we don't get it right. And actually that's a better opportunity than when we get it right in many ways, I think. Yeah.
Nick Ferraby, an absolute pleasure. Great stories, heartfelt, honest and true, faithful ones. Good man. It's been a joy. It's been a joy chatting with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Danno. It's been great. Thank you for having me.